isn't it amazing how some people think that if they don't like guns or if they're scared of them, they can completely violate the Second Amendment rights of others? Now, some states like New York need to be reminded that they're not bigger than the Constitution. New York in particular has shown us that if you have a supermajority Democrat control in the legislature, you can pretty much make up the rules as they suit you politically and do whatever you want regardless of the rights of the people you represent. Now, we've seen constitutional violations from the originally appointed governor and attorney general. Well, now we're starting to see some of the same from politically appointed judges. A New York City judge named Abena Darkeh recently sentenced a Brooklyn man to 10 years in jail for making his own guns. Although homemade guns have always been an American tradition and right, the gun grabbers have created a new fear campaign called the ghost gun. The original justification for legislation of these so-called ghost guns was that 3D printers would allow people to print out massive numbers of guns at their kitchen table. This, of course, was a fear tactic, but legislation was created to include any firearm that didn't have a serial number. In other words, any firearm that the government couldn't trace back to your home address. They weren't really concerned with 3D printed guns, but they knew that they could use them as an excuse to push for nationwide serialization. You see, the ultimate goal here is registration and then confiscation. The ghost gun fear campaign was simply just a way to scare people into getting on board. A software engineer from Brooklyn named Dexter Taylor had been engaging in the American tradition of building guns. Now, Taylor wasn't trafficking guns or stealing guns or doing anything illegal with them. He was just building them as a hobby. In April 2022, police seized what prosecutors are calling an arsenal from Taylor's residence. The so-called arsenal consisted of 8 rifles, 5 pistols, and 50 rounds of ammo. There were also other parts and the dreaded 3D printer. Now, I would think if you're building an arsenal, you'd probably have more than 50 rounds of ammo. The firearms he's accused of having simply sounds like a fun day at the gun range with friends, although the 50 rounds is hardly enough. Dexter Taylor was sentenced to 10 years in prison, not for trafficking guns, not for using his guns to commit crimes, but simply for making guns without a license. Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez said, "Today's sentence should send a message to anyone who, like this defendant, would try to evade critically important background checks and registration requirements to manufacture and stockpile these dangerous weapons. Every ghost gun we take off the street is a win for public safety." Well, the district attorney's message speaks loud and clear and tells you exactly what New York is trying to accomplish. They don't want you to have guns, and they'll use every bit of rhetoric and propaganda they can to support their anti-gun mission. Remember, our founding fathers never intended for the government to be able to track your guns to your front door. The Second Amendment does not read, "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed," as long as your firearms are serialized and registered so the government can track and confiscate them. In fact, our guns were never meant to be any of the government's business. Now, you would think, okay, this case is simple. It's obviously a violation of Taylor's Second Amendment rights, and it should be a no-brainer in court. How could this happen? But like I said earlier, New York Democrats believe they are above the Constitution. They believe they don't have to adhere to anything our founding fathers wrote down in that Bill of Rights if they don't want to. In this particular case, according to Taylor's attorney, Judge Abena Darkeh even instructed them to not bring the Second Amendment into this courtroom, also saying it doesn't exist here. So apparently, you can't argue the Second Amendment in New York State. At least that's what the left-wing gun grabbers want. They'll most likely be met with strong opposition. It's highly likely Taylor will be justified on an appeal. And by the way, Gun Owners of America and Gun Owners Foundation have a similar case in Philadelphia where we're suing the city for making the American tradition of building firearms illegal. The judge could have given Taylor the minimum of 3 years, and that was requested by Taylor's attorneys. But of course, this judge gave him the maximum of 10 years for engaging in the beloved American tradition of building firearms. As reported by Bearing Arms and according to Taylor's attorney, the judge started off by whining about the fact that she was mocked by people on social media. You would think that would give her a clue that maybe she's on the wrong side of the Constitution. Are we starting to see a pattern here? We have allowed anti-American state officials, DAs, and judges to be responsible for our freedom. We've entrusted them with the sacred duty of upholding the Constitution and protecting our rights. We've given the most important job to some of the most disingenuous people, but somehow we blindly expect them to protect the very rights they despise. You can read more about this case and how you can get involved in the description below. Thanks for watching Bullet Points. I'm Dan Wos for Gun Owners Foundation. You can find more Second Amendment content and updates at gunowners.com.